A love letter for the arts will be coming soon. Hosted by Dominic King, this is A Love Letter for the Arts.
Hello and a very good afternoon. Welcome to A Love Letter for the Arts. This is our 5th episode, and it's a chance for us to hear from those in the creative industries across the country. I've been very lucky to have a whole bunch of friends joining me here on what has been a real insight into what we are all perhaps experiencing now within the arts, these strange times with a pandemic, and trying to look at our world and what it means, particularly for individual artists. And today, our guest is singer-songwriter, musician, arranger, record producer, director, conductor. The list goes on. Mike Batt, who is with us here. Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. It's great to have you here. Hello.
Hello, Dominic. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Mike, one person said to me a couple of days ago, you've got Mike Batt on. How long are you giving him? I said an hour, and they said, okay. And is that every week for the next year? The truth is, there's so much to talk about in terms of your career, but I know people will want to send messages as well. And a reminder that you can follow this conversation with a Love Letter for the Arts hashtag. We always connect with that as well. And also you can send in your messages on whatever platform you're watching right now, whether it be on Facebook, on Twitter, or on YouTube. So send your messages throughout here. If you've got a question for Mike, a thought about what you're hearing, then please do get in contact. But Mike, I wonder if we could start actually with just that very title of this, A Love Letter for the Arts. And if you were talking directly to the arts, what would you say to the arts about your own life and experience with it?
Well, I don't know that I would respond to you by talking to, this sort of personification of the arts, because that's not something I would find easy. But to me, to let you know what I think about it, and your listeners and viewers, when you're young, when you're born and you're a toddler, and then you start listening to things or doing things or seeing things that are artistic, you don't actually separate it out. You don't think, oh, that's the arts and these are the sciences. It's only when you get to school and they start to separate you out. What I did notice when I was starting to get artistic, I didn't get into the feeling that I was artistic until I was 8, 9, 10, maybe, quite late, really, in many people's terms. And I found I was good at picking out tunes on the piano and that sort of thing. And I wasn't good at doing other things like chemistry and maths. I was terrible at it. And it seemed to me that I did have an artistic, my interests were all art. I was always used to be doing drawings, paintings. My mum was very arty. So, I mean, she was the completely arty party in our house. And my dad was the civil engineer, who, albeit not non-musical, because he had I'm sure he did have music in him that he just didn't bring out. But his upbringing was army, coming through the war, getting himself a straight job as a very clever civil engineer. He had the very practical side. My mum, I know I'm not directly answering your question, but I'm getting around to it gradually. My mum was a jolly, happy, creative, cartoon drawing, sewing. She made all the clothes we ever wore. We didn't have a lot of money, but we did have our mum who could make us great clothes. So with the 4 kids, we all wore identical, kilts when it was a special occasion, that sort of thing, all made handmade.
So was it that creativity?
I got used to the fact
is it that?
Yeah, and she was so creative. She was always drawing and painting, and she had this jolly persona. And in fact, she but halfway through her life, she was starting to make Womble costumes at my request, because she would make us wonderful dressing up outfits. I remember being Robinson Crusoe. I think, or was I Friday? And so we're getting into territory, PC territory. But anyway, and we were carrying my little brother in a bathtub. I don't know. Oh no, that was when we were rubber dub 3 men in a tub. That's right. All the local church fetes, we used to win the box of chocolates because my mum could make these great. And we used to clean up, every Saturday whenever there was a fete, we would win the fancy dress. So anyway, to me, it was just a natural thing. And so I've sort of drifted into it. And to me, the arts was just part of the fabric of the world. And it is, of course, that's what it is, a reflection of the world. It's when people see a beautiful sunset and they think, oh my goodness, I wish I could recreate that. Wouldn't it be wonderful? I mean, I can't do it as good as the real thing, but I'll try and do a painting of it. And that's what it is. It's I mean, we could have we are having a long conversation, but we could go into great detail about, how useful it is. I heard a quote yesterday where somebody said they were very aware that there were things you needed, and then there were the arts, which is slightly overstating the case against the arts. But I think they were trying to get it into perspective. They were saying, I forget, it was a very neat phrase they'd worked out, which was basically essentials and then the arts. And I actually think the arts are essential. And I'm sorry to have this is a one-sided conversation, because you asked me one question and I went like that. Unlike a politician.
No, but the point is, it isn't something that's just easily expressed. That's the whole point, isn't it? Saying a love letter for the arts is a great kind of idea of what does that mean if we're saying it back to it. But you're right, it's exactly that. And funny enough, Laura in Maidstone makes that point that you've just raised and links into that. Such a great point about children being put into boxes, not discovering their true creativity until much later. What do you think parents, schools, teachers could do differently to nurture the creativity sooner?
What do I think? It's so hard because they've got to look for it in the child. It would be a good. I don't know whether it's the same. I think it's a lot better these days. But when I was a kid, even when I was in grammar school, there was one art master for, at least 1,000 pupils. There was one music master. No, there were two art masters and one music master. The music master just used to. The old-fashioned thing of they'd play you a classical record and sort of sit there, and you'd have to enjoy it and leave, or not, just not enjoy it and then leave, and very little discussion, not an awful lot of practical music. Later on in life, I was asked to be on the curriculum council, to whatever they call it, for the working group for the school curriculum, and I was very strong on trying to put composition into it. I was saying, you know, look, kids, when they are 3, 4, 5, they're given some crayons and paints and told to compose a painting. Asked to, if they would like to compose a painting, perhaps it's less, you know, sort of authoritarian way of putting it. But people would, I've got to say, there's a little bit more technique involved in composing a piece of music than there is in drawing a hill with a, you know, with a house on top of it. But not that much more, really. And that part of one's imagination as a musician maybe takes a bit longer to grow, but it's certainly in there in musical people. And I think not all teachers are musical, therefore they can't always plot it in children. But I think generally speaking, people find their way, you know. And if there is musical, there was no music in my house at all. I told you about my mum being really artistic. She was artistic in lots and lots of ways. And my family loved the populist side of music. But we didn't go out and buy records until, except my dad had we used to buy things like George Formby records because he just bought a gramophone in a junk shop. And that was it, really. We had the light program on a Saturday morning, but that was it. We didn't have, most dads would have, you know, a collection of Sinatra or Count Basie or something, but we didn't have any music. So to me, in my particular case, it was left for me to find my own way. My brothers and sisters found their own way in whichever way they went. And I think that's the case in all society. Eventually, people find what they're good at, if they're lucky. And if they're surrounded by people who encourage them to look, not necessarily tell them what they're good at, but yes, if they perceive they're good at something, to tell them they're good. I'll tell you one thing I think is really bad. It's when, and I think everybody's sort of come to know this these days, but I've always thought it. If a child's being naughty and you say, "You naughty child," you're branding them as a personality. Whereas if you say you are being naughty, you know, you might even say you're not usually like this, but you're being naughty now. And that's a whole different thing. Same as if somebody shows some prowess, or worse, in the choir. How many people do you hear that say, "I've never ever sung since that choir master told me I was tone deaf when I was 11."
Do you know what? That's a really good point, actually, about how we see it. And just on that point, so when we talk about the arts, and I know I present obviously on the radio and arts program, but ultimately it is about film, television, theatre, music, and it's a whole range of things. And the arts sometimes, as a wording, gets kind of lost in that because it feels very highbrow. One thing that I wanted to sort of kick off with you on is about all these different diverse parts of your life. You know, you're the singer-songwriter, you're the musician, you're the arranger, you're the record producer, the director, the conductor. It all goes into one, but at the same time, it's different parts and projects. And I know we're going to have comments from people about different things that you've done throughout this live stream. But I just wanted to sort of pick up on maybe just thinking about how you have sustained that place in the industry, because that's a really difficult thing to do, to keep going. You've done lots of things, Mike. You and I have talked for many, many years about all the different projects, but how have you sustained it? What's your way of doing it for you personally, which might give people watching this a real sense, especially in this bizarre year of 2020?
Well, I followed my wish. I have been a bit greedy, actually, about the number of things I wanted to try and pack into my life. And I do wish I could live another 100 years, you know, so I could sort of finish off all the projects I really want to try and either start or finish. But everyone has that problem. I mean, everyone who wants to pack a certain amount into their life. I don't know. I was just interested in. I wanted to be good at the things that I loved. So that was music, and it was art, which meant that I was interested in, if I hadn't been a composer, I would have wanted to be an animator. So as I went through life, and if I had an album coming out, I thought, oh, I know, I'll put on a slideshow, which has got some semi-animation in it, because although I haven't learned to be an animator yet, when I was 23 or 24 or something, I'd say, okay, well, we'll use these sort of kind of fluttery animations we can get by shooting people in stills, moving very slowly, and it can be look like a Charlie Chaplin film with them running along while I play my album. So, and then we'd invite 100 journalists to focus them, so that they wouldn't all be scratching themselves and reading a book instead of listening to my album. So there was already me putting my own music, which was conceived as an album, to a visual, purely for practical purposes, but also because I loved the practical side of doing it. So I'd stay up all night with a team of people mounting slides and colouring, doing drawings and stuff.
Yeah, immersing yourself.
Yeah, and then somebody would be helping me to program them in on, I don't know, might have only been 20 projectors, but then it grew so that when we did my West End show in 1991, we had 200 and something projectors, all projected onto the same stage, all with a different image on them, so that you could get animations and stuff. And that was just, to me, following a natural path of what was to me just one thing, which is putting a production. Let's stop the word product and put on the end of it, because we all used to hate the word product when we were young, and now, of course, we all hate the word content. It's the same thing, though. It just means a production, and nobody hates the word production. And so, to me, having the idea, writing the song, doing the arrangement, sometimes simultaneously with writing the song, conducting the band, and you can still produce if you're conducting, because you can run in and out the control room and get an idea of what it's like, and you trust the engineer, and then you run back and you change a few things. All of that is such exhilarating work to do. And then put the vocals on, or maybe you have someone that's doing the vocals already while you're conducting, they're singing in the old way, like Sinatra used to. He'd have my favorite arranger, I'm going to forget his blinking name now, Gordon Jenkins, conducting, and Sinatra would be standing right there next to trombones or whatever it might be, actually next to the violas. I think he brought him in and made him stand in the middle of the strings. Oh, no, that was Tom Jones. That was Les Reed with Tom Jones. Different, wow. Two different stories, but all I'm saying is, all it is making something happen. And I can be accused, seemingly rightly so, and I'm glad I put the seemingly in on purpose, because it's common, it's the received wisdom in the industry that one person doesn't usually and shouldn't usually be the main driver of all of those different disciplines. And particularly in the theatre, I got a lot of stick for it when I directed my own and designed my own show. It just happened that kind of art that I was putting forward just happened to have my music. And so I thought, well, if I was just a director and a designer, no one would mind.
But Mike, but at the same time, you co-wrote with Andrew Lloyd Webber Phantom of the Opera, the song, Steve Harley, Sarah Brightman. You had that pedigree as well. I know that the projects you're talking about were earlier to start with in the 70s. But the point is, do you feel that the theatre world welcomed you in? No,
I don't, actually. To be honest with you, since you asked me, I'll tell you bluntly. You asked me bluntly, and I'll tell you bluntly. I don't think, even though lots and lots of good friends in the theatre industry, I think, I don't know. I have experienced it throughout my life that for some reason, and it might have stemmed from that snark way back in 1991, where some people got a bit sort of shirty about the fact that one person shouldn't direct their own show. I mean, the audiences seem to love it. So, I'm not, and I think it's one of the strongest pieces of work I've ever done. But they all say that, don't they? And but I do think that if certain people who otherwise I'm close to really as friends had opened the door professionally to me a little bit more welcomingly and trustingly, we could have had I could have swum around in that theatrical atmosphere just a little bit more freely. But having said that, I've got an awful lot of respect for an awful lot of great people who work in the theatre, and just when it's like film, just when I was wanting to do more film scores, and I knew people who could facilitate that, I might have suddenly had, which I did have, a big hit with Vanessa May, with the violin. We launched her when she was 14, going on 15, and that, we sold, I don't know, 4 million records, just as I was about to put my own new show on that I just spent ages writing. And so that's still a piece of work that actually hasn't hit the stage in full tilt yet. We did a workshop, an open night workshop with costumes and an full orchestra, because I was invited by, you don't even know which project I'm talking about, but I was invited by this orchestra called the Dockland Sinfonia, of which I'm a patron, to conduct them one evening, a 70-piece orchestra.
Right.
And I just said, look, why don't we put my new show on? I think they said that, and I said, let's use I'll get some costumes and when we filmed it. And it's called Men Who March Away. And it's actually never hit the stage properly, but we had that one glorious evening. If anyone wants to catch it, they can go on YouTube and write in the words Men Who March Away, which, by the way, I nicked that title from a poem. And I'm going to even forget who wrote the poem. And there'll be people screaming at the screen saying it was, I can't remember. But anyway,
well, the good thing is people can let us know. They can tweet it in, or they can send it on Facebook, and we'll remind you.
But the title on it anyway, so that people can watch Act 1 and Act 2 of it by going to YouTube and writing in Men Who March Away and my name, so they get the right one, and then you can. It's a couple of hours of putting your feet up and having a cup of tea.
We've had, interestingly, we've seen a few comments that have come in, which we've been putting up on the screen. By the way, watching this, some of the comments will directly share with Mike live on this live stream. Some of the comments will just be comments you just want to say hi, and Mike will certainly see this after the live stream's gone off if he's not seeing them in front when we're in the middle of the conversation. So appreciate that. But I saw the fan club come up, Mike, the official Mike Batt fan club. So that was nice. I saw
one very nice one. Which thank you very much, Jackie.
That's right, Jackie, who sent that. I'm going to keep these messages going as well, because it's really important that this love letter for the arts is also about you being able to have your say too. So if you're on Twitter or Facebook watching this right now, and on YouTube, you can send your comments direct here, and it comes up in the feed, and I'll be looking over into the computer screen and making sure I can bring them up. Let's go to one comment here, and I want you to pick up on a point here being made. This is Joe Bill. Joe is the editor of Scene magazine in Kent, and I think it's that second part that I'm interested in your thoughts on. He says, considering recent funding issues, do you think that the arts are considered more or less important in society than 20 years ago? It's a big one.
So the answer is just yes. They are considered more or less than 20 years ago, which is my way of dodging the question. I don't know whether they're certainly not considered by the world as being less important. I mean, when I was being influenced by, let's just talk about music. Let's just talk about pop music. There's so I was lucky enough to grow up through all the Beatles and the Who and the Stones and the Loving Spoonful and everything that was coming out all around me. It's just like, whoa, what's happening? That's how important, all my friends, we all thought that was how important the arts were, because pop music was just exploding. But it had been, there's been a music scene forever, just different music. Arts has always been grabbed by the public with both hands. Look at how much, what's the right word? Respect and love there is with art galleries being kept to the standards that they are. The wish for it to be there is great. I think if you're just talking about funding, I'm not an expert on that. And whether they're valued by governments or it's a question of priorities, and it's not just money into the arts themselves, i.e. with practitioners who are established or on the way up. It's also to do with education, and the answer really to that question, which I sincerely tried to give, is that I can't answer it. I do believe that the world values the arts just as much as they did when I was 20, but I don't know. I do know that over this time of lockdown, it seems the arts have been pushed down in funding, and that people who are freelancers in the arts world are not being given the same chances as people who have normal jobs in banks or catering establishments, even though that they're not well looked after either. I mean, the government can't, obviously support everybody through every crisis, but I do think that the arts have been rather treated as not as essential to support, perhaps, at every level.
So and I guess the Arts Council and a number of other organisations have put funding pots out there to work within certain areas which we know have been going to people. But it's a complicated one. It's a really complicated one at a weird time.
Yeah, there are some very, very sincere people who are running the arts organisations. People like Darren Henley, who runs the Arts Council, who used to
lives here in Kent.
Yeah. All those people are trying so hard to make it happen and make it work, and they're succeeding in many, many ways. So I don't think we can take that broad brush sort of Twitter-esque approach, like I'm on one side and you're on the other, and you're a bastard because you won't give enough money to this person. There's an awful lot of people doing an awful lot of things in it that are good, as well as the people who we could look and say, well, actually, you could do better.
Okay, apologies for any language issue if you are offended, but this is a live conversation here on the live stream this afternoon. Mike Batt is with me, singer-songwriter, musician, arranger, record producer, director, and conductor. Mike, I want to ask a bit more of your questions, by the way. Keep sending them in. I want to ask a couple of points about music. Let's get into that, because I know that there's a couple of things I want to do. First of all, I'm gonna do the elephant in the room. Although it's not an elephant, it's a womble. Let's do the wombles for.
Did I swear? Because you just apologised for language.
Yeah. I think you said one word, but you weren't expecting to. So we'll look back on the live stream together. But it's not a major problem. We're all adults here.
I haven't said anything beginning with F, C, or B.
It's a B. Now I'm going to ask you about the wombles. First of all. This was really interesting because this came about because of the band issue, didn't it? 1973 is when we started to see that happening. Elizabeth Beresford, the creator of the Wombles, but you did a very clever thing involving the rights that happened. Can you talk us through that? Yeah,
I didn't think it was being clever at the time particularly. I just loved the Wombles characters, which were being created by Ivor Wood, the animator, just as much as, well, not just as much as, Elizabeth Beresford is the mother of the Wombles, and Ivor Wood is really the father of them because he designed the look of them, because in the original book, they look like teddy bears.
Right, yeah.
And he said, no, I think they should look different. So he made them look like, almost like mice, really. But anyway, different, but like that, cuddlier. And so is Ivor, and it wasn't even my creation, but I thought, I'd been asked to write the theme music for it, and when they said, "Can you do a theme tune?" I went to see Ivor Wood, the animator, and he said, "Can we have a tune?" And I said, "Well, what about a song? Because if we write a song, I can write some lyrics. They might be quite silly lyrics about the characters. We asked Uncle Bulgaria could be in it, and I could talk about litter and everything." They said, "That's great. Let's try that." So I lived on a houseboat. I remember writing this song there and then on the houseboat. I say there and then, when I got home. And then I remember being on a train going into London to play it to Ivor and his other animators. I hadn't got all the lyrics, I was finishing them off, and there's a little girl playing on the floor of the train from West into London with her mum supervising her. And I thought to myself, rather perhaps a little bit grandly, I wonder if that little girl will ever hear this song I'm writing. And it's obvious that she probably did, because if she grew up in England, in the 70s, she would have done. And I often think back to that moment, and it reminds me that when you're writing a song, or even particularly more when I'm listening to the first single by an artist, I often think that artist wrote that song when they didn't even know they were going to have any success at all as an artist or with that song. So something like, who can we think of who had a first single? And let's not even try, because I'm going to not come up with one. But I often think, wow, that was written completely cold when the artist had no money, nothing going for them, probably no record deal. And Bob's Your Uncle, it was the touch paper, the blue touch paper that lit their career. And you know, and that takes me right back to that moment in the train, the little girl on the floor of the railway train, and me thinking, I wonder if this song will ever get heard so that she'll hear it.
You wavered your fee, didn't you? That was about 200 quid at the time for the song, so that you could get the rights. Yeah,
you're pulling me back onto the question like a very good interview. I went off track there slightly. They said to me, how much, you know, do you think it should be? Because we'd normally pay about 200, which in those days, you work it out, 200 quid in 1972 was probably, well, it was certainly over 1,000 quid, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 quid. And I thought, well, I needed it. I really did. I was low at the bank, or I was in the red. And I just said, you know what? If you would let me have the rights to write more music about the Wombles, because I just love the characters, and promote it by in whatever way. I hadn't even thought I was ever going to dress up as a Womble. And they said, sure, that's fine. We haven't got that in any business plan or anything. You can have that. So I ended up owning the rights to the music and the characters for music and entertainment type purposes, which put me in a good place for when I did want to publicize the record. When that was at the point when I rang my mum up and said, look, my record company are not taking me seriously. They won't even let me in the door to discuss it with the marketing department. Do you think you could make me a Womble costume so I can walk in and surprise everybody? Which I did. And of course, everybody fell about laughing. Somebody sent for the company photographer, and it was me and all the managing director and everyone. And suddenly they had an artist they could relate to. Whereas before that, it was just some TV show they hadn't even heard of. And suddenly I was sort of being, you know, put on television, and that took a while as well. You know, it was a big, long push to try and get them to be recognised as. And I put the Womble costume on a Monday morning. I only had one costume, and I wore it till Saturday evening. I took it off to sleep and have a shower in the morning. I've got to tell you, just tell you in case you didn't. But I wore it, and wherever I went, I wore the Womble costume, whether it was in the tube in London, just pretending to read a newspaper, just to get the image of it out there. And it eventually, Tony Blackburn was the one who started playing the record on his morning show. So I've got a lot to thank him for as well.
It's lovely though about some of the creations you've made. We'll talk about some of those artists you've worked with, but it also links me into something else about how I know that I cried so much as a kid listening to a certain song of yours. Sorry about that, Mike. And it had such a resonance with a lot of people. In fact, just before we came on and did our live stream, a friend of mine, Nikki, a neighbour across the road from here, she said, "Oh, I know you're chatting to Mike Batt this afternoon." And I said, "Oh, about this particular song," and she said, "Oh, don't mention the song to me. Do not mention the song to me because I will burst out crying." And I went, "Nikki, what are you talking about?" She said, "No, I can't." And I said, "Well, that had the effect on me, but as a kid, are you talking about you now?" And she's kind of my age, and she said, "Oh, no, don't mention the song." And I said,
"Yeah, I do find
Bright Eyes."
Yeah, I thought you were going to say "Remember You're a Womble," but
no, Bright Eyes, and you know, Art Garfunkel performing your song. The song that was used for Watership Down, the movie. It got remade again recently, but the original, boy, terrifying. And that song, Oh, that just, I mean, actually, the reason I cried was because the emotion was taken. It was like when you first watched the Bambi film. It had the same kind of pull. And that song particularly, what was that like creating that song?
Well, it's a long story that I'll try and keep short, unlike my Womble story. I was asked by all through my relationship with CBS Records, which had grown out of the Womble relationship, from the Womble relationship. I was asked by the senior people there if I'd meet with the people that were making the Watership Down film, and they didn't really want songs in their film. They wanted it to be serious, bloody, aggressive, like an adult novel. And I thought to myself, well, fair enough, but Disney is actually some of the greatest art in the world. The early Disney films with beautiful, sometimes funny, sometimes sad songs, whatever. But I did write them this song, and it was thrown off the film for that very reason, that they didn't want to make a kidsy widsy kind of let's sing a song type of film. It was thrown off the film 3 times. Thankfully, it was reinstated 3 times. And it was just put back in the film shortly before it was released.
Wow.
And about, 15, 20 years ago, I had dinner with, which was even then 20 years after it was released, because it must be 40 years ago. And the producer said to me, I got to tell you, after all these years, I feel a bit, I don't know, big-headed, sort of whatever, braggy by saying this, but this is me talking, not him, by telling you it. But he said, our film was dying on its arse until your record went #1. And
Wow.
suddenly the box office just went like a rocket. And so he said, all these years later, I'll have to admit that there was a place in that film for a song. So it's nice. Apparently that happened to Somewhere Over the Rainbow. That was left out of the Wizard of Oz until the very last minute, just like Bright Eyes was with Watership Down. So it just shows even people, very important people who are very good at what they do, making films, aren't always right. And sometimes they get lucky.
Yeah, it's a mixture, isn't it? And actually, the emotion of that, for me, I could only speak personally. I'm sure other people have as well. That is the movie for me. That song has to go with the movie. The song is part of it. Without it, I'm not sure. I think I just would have been terrified by the animation. The song is kind of ethereal. The song allows you to feel. And I think actually, when you're a little kid and you listen to that song, as I was, your emotion and how you are as an emotional person, if you hear something that makes you feel that way, but at the same time, there's an enjoyment in what you're listening to, I think that's a really great way of opening up your feelings. So I think you did more. You probably helped a lot of us for therapy later on in life, to be honest with you, Mike.
Well, I must say that another thing that happened after I wrote that song, because it was important in my life for a couple of reasons, but I was actually going to talk more about the emotional effect on other people, which I'll come to. But the reason it was important in my life was that in this country particularly, not other countries, because the Wombles weren't known in other countries, but in this country, it was almost impossible for me to get arrested as a solo artist. And it probably has remained that way, to be fair. I've always kind of wished, people said, oh, you've done so many things, but, I didn't really ever break through. I had one hit as a solo artist, but I never really made it as a sort of, I'm not going to name names, but as a famous artist, as you would call it. And yeah, in other countries, Germany, Australia, I had a bit more success with those things, like my solo albums and stuff. But when I wrote Bright Eyes, people started to think, well, this bloke can obviously write songs, and that was when it changed a bit and people started taking it a bit more seriously. I think the Wombles will always have an effect, a dampening effect on the arts world in general, having respect for me as a person, because they think, oh, he's the Wombles guy. And it's such a strong image that, yeah, I am happily and proudly so, but they don't think, yeah, so if I hadn't done the Wombles and I'd only done Bright Eyes and I'd only done the other things, I'd just be one of the well-known film composers in the world, or I'd be a well-known rock star, or I'd be whatever it was. But coming back to your very, very early points you made in this interview, because I spread myself so thinly, I had a brilliant time being, fulfilled by all these artistic endeavors.
Yeah,
Some of them crashed and burned, and some of which were immensely successful. And you couldn't be happier than I am as an artist, because I'm also hustling around as a businessman, trying to get things funded like any film producer, or trying to get out of a hole I've dug for myself, over the years, whatever it might be. That the adventure, the downs and the ups of that is all part of what my life's experience has been and will continue to be. But it's the thing that didn't happen was becoming the next Cat Stevens, shall we say? But then you could say that what's Cat Stevens done in the last? Well, actually, he's my hero, so I'm not going to say anything negative. But all I'm saying is that all artists, they do peak. Not all artists. I mean, look at people like Rod Stewart. He's still going after years. Look at Elton. So I'm not saying that because you become a well-known peak artist, you therefore are going to peak, forgive the pun, and fall. But there's more chance of it. Whereas if you're like me and you bob and weave and you stay involved in all the different types of art, and it's all one big artistic thing, living, breathing thing to you, then there's less chance that you're going to be thought of as central to rock, ballet, classical conducting, design of theatre. All of the things I've done, I'm never going to be the central character in any of them because I'm in all of them. Do you see what I mean?
It's about staying relevant, but at the same time, it's about staying fulfilled. In the arts, it's all about, having an idea, following it on. I'm very much a project person. I know you are. You love doing different things. You're enthusiastic. You're passionate about what you do. And, even off air, when you and I are chatting, it's a kind of great sense from you that you're just kind of like doing your next thing. Right, what have I got to do? We had a chat before we started this live stream. And, I know you've got some projects you're doing right now. It's a great thing. I want to take some more comments as well. If you're just tuning into the live stream, welcome along. It's amazing how quick it goes. We're here till 6 o'clock.
By the way, I can't see any of these comments. So if I'm not reacting to any of them, guys, I apologize for that. And the fact is I can't see them, and I'm leaving it to Dominic to pick them up.
Absolutely. And the great thing is, Mike, there's been lots of lovely comments that have been coming through. But let's just have a reminder of who we are talking to on this live stream this afternoon. Singer, songwriter, musician, arranger, record producer, director, and conductor Mike Batt is with us on this live stream. And, it's so fantastic because we look at all the things and, you're talking about the music, Mike, and under Dramatico, which is your company, you've created some amazing songs for a number of artists. And we'll maybe talk about some of those. One being Katie Melua, who you discovered, and the songs that you created, for anyone who doesn't know. I mean, I think there was about 6 of them on the first Katie Melua album, including the brilliant songs about 9. I always get the number wrong as well. My maths is always a bit rubbish. But how many million bicycles are there in Beijing?
There were 9 million in about 2005. I don't know. They might have been breeding since then.
There might be more bikes. So and that was a great, for us, a soundtrack to our lives. Katie Melua came onto the scene, and then it was just brilliant. And the Pieces by Pieces album too.
Yeah, the Piece by Piece album. Actually, 9 Million Bicycles was on the Piece by Piece album, and that was her biggest album. Even though the first one was 6 times platinum in this country, the second one, yeah, Call Her for Search, which had, of course, The Closest Thing to Crazy, which I had. I'd written it for myself as a solo artist, which again illustrates the fact that I wasn't really seen as a solo artist in this country by, people who had the powers. By the way, this is called an undampener that I'm using here.
An undampener?
Yeah, it's for undampening my face.
Okay.
Moving on.
I wish I had one. I don't have one.
Well, go and undampen yourself, and I'll just keep on talking.
Okay.
Anyway, kick me off
There you
by
go.
telling me what was I talking about?
You were talking about the fact that you had an idea you had the song, The Closest Thing to Crazy, which was going to be your song first of all,
right.
before you go to Katie Melua.
Yeah, well, welcome. Yeah, I was going to say welcome to Dominic's show, but you're back. So yeah, I had written that, and it had been on an album 10 years earlier with me singing it, and the record company hadn't even released the album. I'd made it in Germany with the German Sony, Epic. I made 6 solo albums for Epic, and the record company in this country didn't even think it was worth releasing, and it had on it Closest Thing to Crazy. And then 10 years later, I found Katie, and we got her to sing that song. And of course, she sang it beautifully. And I played it to a friend of mine at the BBC, Paulie Walters, who was the lovely producer of Terry Wogan.
Sorry, yeah.
And I said, I know, Paul, this will be too slow for you. You won't want to put this on, but I'm just playing it to you. I think the track you need, the tracks I need to be playing you for actually on the air should be more up tempo. He said. He took it back to his office, and he sent me a note. He's saying, I said I was thinking of taking it off the album. He said, if you take The Closest Thing to Crazy off that album, I will never speak to you again.
Wow.
That was Paul Walters, the producer of the Wogan Show, and he played it, and it was a massive hit. So I'm very, very grateful to both him and to Katie, of course, because we sold 11 million records together, and spent 10 years making those records, and it was a great time of my life.
Back in the 80s, you produced hits for Cliff Richard, David Essex, Alvin Stardust. You, in terms of working with artists, what's always been your way? How do you relate? How do you link in? What's the Mike Batt way?
I'd like to think there isn't one, but rushing into projects slightly underfunded is the Mike Batt way, I'm afraid, in a negative sense. The rushing in is quite good. I think enthusiasm, isn't ever wasted. But sometimes you can be a bit over enthusiastic and a bit too confident. So overconfidence is part of my trick, if you like. And if I hadn't been overconfident with Katie and poured everything I had into it and literally bet the farm on it, we wouldn't have broken her. I absolutely can promise you that. I literally, over 10 years, I spent £10 million on TV advertising with Katie, and if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have sold the number of records we did. But so that's to do with commitment. But if you do that on a project where you don't sell the records, and there have been some of those, I haven't spent 10 million on those, but you make a project that you absolutely love, and the public don't agree. That can happen. And it's happened to me. And those are the hard knocks that make up that strengthen you. I know it's corny as hell to say the old hard knock life, but that's what it is. I sometimes envy people who have lovely, smooth lives, gradual, they're sensible, and they might just be as ambitious as me, but they're sensible, and they calculate it, and they move, and they build their empires. And I've sometimes wanted to do that, and I'm sometimes jealous of them. And then I think to myself, you know what? They haven't had the sort of pugilistic rock climbing life that I've had, and I sort of like those, reaching those little pinnacles, even though my pinnacles might be slightly smaller than their pinnacles.
I like the fact you call it the rock climbing life, because that's how you feel. Do you feel you're constantly climbing the mountain? Do you ever? This links in brilliantly to this question here, which is from Penny. I wonder whether you ever reach the top of the mountain, or whether you're ever going to. Mike has done so much, says Penny, but what do you, Mike, see for yourself in the future? What will make you feel fulfilled? Hello,
Penny. Thanks for asking that question. I'm sort of, in the back of my mind, I've got this little plan to stay alive as long as possible. so that my bucket list can get as much ticked off it as possible. But the problem is, the longer I live, the bigger the bucket list gets, the longer the bucket list gets. So I think every artist has to realize that one day that there'll be 6 projects they haven't actually managed to get to, and they'll be off, with the angels. But there are so many projects that are either half finished, not even done, like the musical I told you, Men Who March Away. Just needs, well, of course, in a COVID situation, that's on hold, and I'll be looking for a producer to work with after that. There's always a project, but there's never. I think it's because as I said again, because I do so many things in so many different areas. It's not like, right, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do next year, unless one has an opening night set. And a rehearsal period that they start, with the rehearsal room booked. I'm talking about theatre, of course. Films, you get 6 weeks to write the music, and if you get a locked print or whatever it is these days, a locked film, and 6 weeks to write it, I would love it if a few more producers would think, after all these years, because I haven't written a feature film for at least 12, 15 years, something like that. I'd love it. I'd love that to happen, but that may not happen. But hey, if it doesn't, there'll be something left field. Like, as I say, Vanessa May came swinging into my life. Yeah. Again, we had no idea she was going to be successful. And Bob's Your Uncle, she sort of financed the next step up the next mountain.
That was incredible, and just all these projects have always been interesting because they really have been part of our lives. The soundtrack to our lives is what I always say, but it really is. And you literally are able to go, oh yeah, that, and then sometimes people don't even know that you're behind a certain thing, and I think that's always intriguing if they do a bit of digging. Derek says, Dom, can you please ask Mike to mention the story about writing the last verse of Soldier's Song while Alan Clark was singing the previous verse in the recording studio? If we can keep it brief as well, Mike. If it's possible.
I'll keep it as brief as I can. In 1980, I was just about to leave on a 2-year trip around the world on a boat that I bought and took my family away with me. And the last job I had before I left was the Hollies asking me to write 3 songs for them and produce them. So one of them was Soldier's Song, and it was a story about a young 18-year-old, 20-year-old lieutenant, 17 actually, because it's in the lyrics. Riding out to a sort of Battle of Waterloo type of thing to join his 1st Brigade, and there's a whole story that happens in it. And I knew what was going to happen in the 3rd verse. I hadn't quite written it yet, and the Hollies and I were in the studio at Lansdowne Studios in Holland Park, and we thought, okay, Alan, you go in and start, and I'll and he would sing the 1st, 2nd verse. It didn't just sing once through. Of course, you sing it several times through, and you work on it. And while he was doing it, I was scribbling, the last verse and trying to make it as good as I possibly could. And sure enough, by the time we'd done the choruses and overdubbed a few harmonies, I had the lyric as I wanted it, which typifies the way I work, because is the tighter the deadline, the better the work. Usually, I can't promise that that's always the case. I mean, if you said you wanted to have a fully fledged musical written by tomorrow morning, I'd probably have to disappoint you. But I do like a tight deadline, and that was a tight deadline. So thank you, Derek, for asking that question.
I bet you would give it a go, though. I bet you'd give it a go if you had to do an all-nighter.
If Cameron rang up tomorrow morning and said, look, let's call it not such a ridiculous thing as tomorrow morning, but you've got 3 weeks and £2 million, and opening night is, on Thursday, late December, I'd have it done, and it wouldn't be crap. And that crap's not a swear word, is it?
You can get away with that. Now, listen, you and I first met, didn't we, in the kind of mid-90s, the Channel Tunnel of all the places in the world, Churton near Folkestone, when you were performing and you had created the official anthem for the inauguration of the Channel Tunnel. The Channel Tunnel breakthrough happened in 1990. I think this was around 94, if I recall. 95, 94, I think.
I can't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, and there was a great moment where the Queen and President Francois Mitterrand came off the train. Tell us what happened next.
Well, the idea was that I had the lovely Robert Meadmore, who's a wonderful baritone singer, West End singer. He was going to be singing it and did sing it. I made the arrangement for the Royal Engineers Band, and all the world leaders were there. Tony Blair and all of the government were there. It was a big, big situation. We knew the Queen was about to come around. And I said to the bandmaster, right, now, this is when you start playing it, so that when the Queen comes around the corner, she'll hear it. And so the bandmaster did, but I didn't realise there was another plan in place, which is that actually the Queen would have left by the time it was going to be played, and it wouldn't have got heard. And I accidentally got the bandmaster into trouble because he got a very strict letter afterwards saying that he shouldn't have played it then, and that made the Queen stand there for 4 minutes listening to my song. But the Queen obviously didn't have it in for me, because some years later she was very nice to me and gave me a gong. So, you know, I should be happy and glorious about it and grateful.
It was a very interesting day. I remember it. And there were loads of school kids, weren't they, that they'd learnt your song and how to sing.
Yeah, it wasn't great weather, but it was a lovely day.
No. Yeah, it was raining a bit. We had umbrellas and everything.
Yeah, it's a sort of life lesson, really, isn't it? You don't have to have sunshine to have a lovely day. It needs school kids and music and the Queen.
One thing I wanted to say as well is we both have a mutual friend, the composer, songwriter Richard Kerr, who lives just around the corner from where I'm talking now. And you and I were at an event just before Christmas, because you are a member of the songwriters. You get this right, Songwriters of Distinction, Distinguished Songwriters. That's it, Society of Distinguished Songwriters. Everyone else can do an acronym, and it's wonderful. I remember being in the room in this hotel in London, quite a posh one, and there we were, and hearing you on stage perform with your friends, these great songwriters, your contemporaries. What's that like for you every time you go to that and you actually are there with mates, but at the same time it's the world of music in one place?
Well, it's a wonderful thing to, when we all meet up. We meet up when COVID's not prevalent, because we haven't met this year at all, of course. But we meet up 2 or 3 times a year, 3 or 4 times a year, actually. It used to be. It's now two dinners, and then in December we have a ladies' night, as we call it, which is, we don't have to change the name of it, but it's going to, the family night, and everyone comes, brings their family, and we songwriters who are the hosts of it get up and we do a cabaret. So Tim Rice will get up and, he knows he's not the best singer in the world, but he does his best, to sing, The Coat of Many Colours, or pretend to Elvis song, Marty Wilde, and join in with them or something. I might get to sing Bright Eyes or some silly song I might have written specially for it. It's just a lovely evening, and it's black tie, and we have a great time. And it's one of those evenings where you just let our hair down, if we've got any left. And some of us, we've sadly lost 2 or 3 of our most distinguished songs. The most recent and one of the most distinguished, of course, is Herbie Kretzmer, who we lost last week very tragically. He was 95. He is the lyricist of Les Miserables, and the lyrics to that are absolutely brilliant. He didn't just translate the French. He created such brilliant songs, as everybody knows, in that musical. And before that, he'd written Goodness Gracious Me, Oh Doctor, I'm in Trouble, with Sophia Peter Sellers. Yeah. Bangers and Mash.
Yes.
It's quite a lot of great songs, and Les Miserables was just a glorious convergence. Is that the right word? Of talent and luck for him as well, and luck for Cameron, who hired him. And it was just a brilliant thing. So anyway, very, very sadly, he's a lovely, lovely man. He died, and in fact, he had his funeral was one of those Zoom funerals where you can't actually go. and I was privileged to be able to be, you know, at it, shall we say, through Zoom, and we said goodbye to Herbie only yesterday. But he was one of our. In fact, he wrote the song yesterday when I was young for Charles Aznavour. And so goodbye, Herbie, and rest in peace, because he was absolutely a wonderful gentleman, and I'm privileged to have known him. So I know you asked me a nice, cheerful question about how.
No, but do you know what? That I think this year particularly, Mike, has been a year of reflection for us all, and I think it's so important that we actually do honour those who have been there before, paved the way, been part of your life as well. So I think that's absolutely right to do. Loads of people with lovely thoughts that have come in. Thank you so much for everyone who sent their messages in on the show here. Penny saying, you don't have to have sunshine to have a lovely day. A life quote right there. Love it. And Mark just saying about Bangers and Mash. That's an earworm song. And Mark, a little earlier, I mentioned this because he said, I've still got Alvin Stardust. I feel like Buddy Holly. Yeah, it's a great song too. Mike Batt has been with us, singer-songwriter, musician, arranger, record producer, director, and conductor. Mike, thank you so much for taking part in our special love letter for the arts with you. And I'm going to leave the last thought for you about just what you think is any advice to anyone who's watching this, who is a songwriter, a musician, a composer, an artist, someone who's creative, someone who's just watching this because they're a fan, about what being creative can mean now and in the future. Just a little thought from you to end.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. One is to say the being creative is the most important bit, whether you find it to be commercially successful or not. And so if you're talking to people who are creative and want to be creative, just keep doing it. So it's all about patience, getting better at it. If you're brilliant already at it, that's great, brilliant. Look, keep going. But commercially, we don't live in a world where things fall at our feet, and you just have to keep on going. So it's patience, resilience. Now we've got the internet. You've got everybody competing against you, who normally would have had to wait until they got signed up by a label, and now, wonderfully, but also terribly, they don't have to. So if they're lousy, they're competing against you. And if they're great, they're competing against you, and they deserve to. So from a commercial standpoint, any young people, you being born in a very, very harsh environment, but you've got a launch pad that's like no other. I didn't have it, so it was very, very difficult when I broke into the business, and it's very, very difficult now, but all for different reasons. But the main point I'm making is, if you are arty and you like doing artistic things, just do them, because that it's free to do that. And now, well, pretty much doesn't cost very much. It just takes time, and it takes your self-belief, a little bit of self-belief. The worst thing of all is to think, oh, I'm not good enough, or I never make it. I used to think there must be certain people that can write hit songs, and maybe I'm not one of them, And then when I had a hit, I thought, well, that wasn't a very good theory, was it? And so I proved myself wrong. But, there's other ways of being successful. Doing something that you love is already being successful, and whether you make a living at it or not. So that is one of the great things about our, I nearly said profession, but it doesn't have to be a profession. It can be just enjoyment. And so that would be my main, coming back to the same thing. Just do it because you love it. And if you happen to be successful at it commercially, well, that's a big win. But it's not something you should ever pin your life happiness on.
Do it because you love it. Mike Batt, thank you so much for being with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thank you, Dominic. It's really great of you to invite me. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Mike Batt with us here on the live stream. It's been fantastic, hasn't it? I can't believe how quickly the hour goes every time. It's so good. And this is our 5th live stream on A Love Letter for the Arts. And it's something I just do away from my normal day job, something I thought I should do because of the times we're in. And I was going to do about 2 of them and then stop. And then you suddenly sent me messages saying, who's next? So who knows who's next? And if you've got ideas about what we should cover, we've covered everything, film and music and comedy. Well, we haven't done too much on comedy. We've had comedy actress on, Sue Vincent, recently. But if you've got an idea, then just send a message under this stream that you're watching, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And I'll be back again soon here to do the next live stream with guests. But Mike Batt, singer-songwriter, musician, arranger, record producer, director, and conductor, and so much more, and rock climber, it seems, was with us on this live stream this afternoon. I'm going to end, though, this, as we did last time, actually, with just a thought about someone from the entertainment industry who we've lost recently, very recently. From me, Dominic King, thanks for watching.
It's the Cannon and Ball Show, starring Tommy Cannon and Bobby Ball.
Rock on, Tommy, you'll do for me, cocker.